What is up, Christmas party people? HG3 here, and today we're going to talk about game theory once again. We're going to talk about the nature of proactive cards versus reactive cards. So let's start with reactive cards because it's much more straightforward and you're all familiar with it. A card like Alzur's Thunder is a reactive card because it allows you to remove 7 strength from a non-gold unit on the battlefield. But to remove 7 strength from a non-gold unit, there needs to be a non-gold unit on the other side. So this is a responsive action, aka a reactive card. If your opponent plays a unit that can gain some value by staying on the battlefield, or even just any unit, you have an opportunity to respond with something like an Alzur's Thunder. In this case, Alzur's Thunder would take out the Ancient Foglet. And as we look through the card catalog, we can see that a great many number of cards are reactive cards. All specials that are damage dealing require units to be in play to achieve that damage. The Stemmelford's Alzur's Thunder. We have Meridian Bomb as a reactive card. You have to have units to be able to revert their strength on the battlefield. Those actions have to happen prior. Manticores, a great many of them. Now, among these, there are some proactive cards. And let's talk about proactive cards now so you can distinguish the difference. The easiest example to discuss proactive cards is a card that you've all probably seen more than you'd like to see of recently. It's the new Fireball Trap. Now, many ambush cards for Scoia'tael are proactive cards because they're put into play and then their action is going to occur based off of your play. They're an active instance in play and they're controlling the situation by being in place rather than having to act as a result of the opponent's actions. And if that's a little jumbled and confused, I picked up the definition from dictionary.com so you guys can understand it a little more clearly. It says proactive is creating or controlling a situation by causing something to happen rather than responding to it after it has happened. That's exactly what the Fireball Trap does. The Fireball Trap causes you to try and play around the 5 strength damage that's going to come out of it. And if you don't, you're going to end up losing a unit. And it's very different in terms of what it makes you do than what a card like Alzur's Thunder existing in your opponent's hand would happen. And there are other instances of proactive cards. Another one is the new version of Dandelion. Dandelion buffs units by 2 strength as they come into the battlefield on your side. 1 strength for opponents. This is another proactive card. You're getting effects and actions and is dictating a situation, and it's an interesting concept. Weather can also be a proactive card at times. Now, many people are using Weather as a reactive card right now because Weather is able to clear off green buff. Weather is able to kind of constrain your opponent and limit the scope of what they can do at certain times. So it's more of a reactionary play right now. But it's not impossible to play Weather as a proactive card where you place down Marigold's Hailstorm on the battlefield and you say, now you have to play into this, you have to play around it. You've got to figure out how to deal with this. If you don't have a First Light in your hand, you're actually controlling the situation and you're making the situation more precarious for your opponent. So this is actually potential of being proactive and reactive, which is why Weather is pretty damn good. Now, one of the most typical reactive cards is the Doblantha Archer. It's reactive in its nature. You play it after a unit has already been placed on the battlefield. You deal 5 damage to it. It's a fantastic card because 5 damage is removing a great many of bronze units in the game. And what Doblantha Archer did for existing and being so good in this capacity was this card made it very difficult, near impossible to play certain other proactive cards which had to be on the battlefield to gain strength from their abilities. Even within the own faction, a card like Hawker Support became virtually unplayable because of the existence of a card like Doblant the Archer. And since its strength is so low, it's not just Doblant the Archer that's blocking this card from play. It's actually a great many cards, including the Brokvar Archer from Skellige, which isn't even played too often, the Vulture Bird thingy from Monsters, and so on and so forth. So these kind of reactive cards can dictate what kind of proactive cards are able to be utilized in a deck in the current state of things. And that brings me to where I really wanted to go with this discussion. It's the nature of having Quen, which is a protective card, as a reactive card. So, protection being reactive means that you're presenting your opponent with a chance to attack. For example, if I decide to reinforce out my Redanian elites, who knows why I decide to do it? Maybe it's my only play. That's 3/8 on my melee row, that's 24 strength. I can have my Quen in hand, but my opponent gets one phase to act, to say, hey, can I deal with this? And maybe they have a Manticore's Venom and they can take away half of my entire value. Maybe they have Lacerate, it's close to half, not exactly. They can have Weather, throw it down. And in that step from me playing that reinforced play to the point where I can use Quen effectively, they have a great opportunity to just take away everything I gained from my initial play. So the problem existing with a card like Quen, which is protective in its nature, is that it's reactive. So by the time you get to ever use it, is it actually going to be capable of protecting value that's worthwhile? In the scenario I just presented, if I have 24 strength on the melee row and it gets hit by a Manticore's Venom and it goes down to 12 strength on the melee row, then using Quen on it, I'm using a bronze card to protect 12 points of value while not adding anything to the battlefield. It really isn't that significant of an action. And at that point, why am I not using Promote? And the only reason that I can find to say why I would use Quen instead of Promote, the buffing potential that exists if your units aren't promoted. But again, that makes it a much more grand process, and in that step where I lost value off of my units between playing them and using the Quen, is this even worth it to have them open to buffs? Or should I just instead have an active card in this slot like an Aneka or something that can actually just bring more strength into the battlefield and play around whatever is harassing my units on the melee row? So let me say a disclaimer and put that out there that I don't fancy myself a developer, and like in terms of long-term repercussions of an idea, and I don't know. I haven't thought of this. Like, I haven't spent the last week researching and determining whether or not I think my coming suggestion is absolutely foolproof and amazing. But here we go. I think Quen should be a proactive ability. And I don't know what the best way to make it a proactive ability is, but one way that I've conceptualized is playing Quen as a row buff. And that means that I would place Quen on my melee row. Don't have to have any units. There's just a shield protecting the melee row. Anything that hits a unit on the melee row itself, or, applies weather to the melee row, would take Quen off. And Quen would block it, and that would be it. But what that allows me to do is I can play Quen down there, and then I can play units into it that have one instance of protection. And it's not applying to each individual unit. It's one instance of attack gets blocked. So someone running efficient damaging units, like Northern Realms running a trebuchet, one trebuchet shot thrown to the way melee row would take it off. But it would be enough to get me to a second action without having to gush out value. And it would make Quen a much more reasonable card, because you'd actually get protection from it instead of just pushing your opponent to use their damaging spells before you can use Quen. I think it would be much more interesting, and then we also have better interactions with other proactive cards. For example, if you see your opponent has placed down a fireball trap, then you can respond by placing a Quen on one of your rows. And now your opponent still has their fireball trap, and the fireball trap, the next time you play a unit, if you play it into the Quen roll, it will proc, and it will hit the Quen. So you have a way for every faction to play around stuff like that, stuff like the really strong proactive play on the battlefield. Now, I wanted to bring Keira into the discussion somehow, because she is another instance of reactive protection. And I think protection in its nature needs to be proactive, so you're actually getting something out of it. But we talked about ways to interpret value in a previous video, and Keira right now doesn't offer a great deal of value that would exceed that of Quen or Promote. So I think Keira, to be a worthwhile acquisition, needs to gain a little bit more. Like, either she's throwing instances of protection to people coming into the battlefield as they're being played, maybe lower her base strength to facilitate that so she's removable herself, or maybe she blocks people from hard removal. Maybe she blocks one person from hard removal. She comes onto the battlefield, she's a gold card. She throws her gold to another unit. I don't know how good that would be in terms of like actual value, like her just transferring a promote. But something to that effect might be worthwhile for her, and it may make her more playable. But again, I feel as though protection needs to be proactive. Otherwise, there's too many steps involved where you're just going to end up having to lose a great deal of your strength, because playing stuff like Keira on a row that consists of 2 field medics and Quen sergeant is not going to win you the game. You're not saving anything meaningful. You have to get stuff out there first for Keira to be able to protect it and for it to be worthwhile. But how are you going to get stuff out there without the opponent reacting? Like, unless you're playing against the most greedy opponent in the world, which happens sometimes. I am one of those greedy players. But if you're playing against a level-minded, straightforward player, they're going to act, and you're going to end up having Keira come into the battlefield where everything's ravaged and it looks like a mess. It's like the scene from The Patriot where almost everybody's dead and there's no one to save you anymore. So I think that it needs to be more proactive in its nature. And I really love the concept of Keira. I love the concept of Quen because I like being able to protect your investments. I think it's unreasonable to think that only Promote is a single mechanic that can protect your investments. It's not really fair for the other factions that don't have Promote and they end up risking it all because they want to buff units. They want to have green strength. They want to have all these great things that just aren't viable right now. So this is my idea on the matter, while also explaining proactive cards versus reactive cards, so you can identify when you're deck building. You could say, am I including proactive cards and reactive cards? Do I need to include proactive cards? Can I just use reactive cards? And what kind of situation are these reactive cards going to be useful in? So, I hope you liked this video today. I'm HG3. This is another video from Gwent Game Theory. And I'll see you next time. I hope you had an amazing Christmas. The stream will be back up on Monday, December 26th. And I hope to see you there. Peace out. Shoutouts to Mante XD, Nezlorth, and Gwent Daily. Peace out for real this time.